Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight on the Ghost Furnace. We have a super exciting episode for you this evening. Not only am I here with my good friend Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
I'm a little winded from running across town, but I'm here.
But the reason we're so excited, not only because Nick was able to finally sprint 400 or 500 yards at one time, but we are joined tonight with our good new friends, Jamie and Jenny from Penn, Ohio Bigfoot Research. How are you guys doing this evening?
Hello.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes.
We are very excited to have you. In full disclosure for everybody, we have met previously. They kind of serendipitously were at one of me and Nick's shows a few weeks ago, and we thought they were just cool looking, but turns out after we started chatting, not only do we have some mutual friends, but we think that they're gonna have some stories that you guys are going to be interested in, I think. And it's fun because it's not often, I was saying this to Nick that night, it isn't often that we run into people, as you say, like in the wild, that are into similar stuff as we are.
Yeah, that's cool. In the wild, I like it.
Yeah, I like that in the wild.
In reality.
Right.
I believe I hear the dog squeaky toy already, so that's perfect.
Well, we said he's part of our research group, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so part of the team.
Be known.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess the first big question I have for you guys is for Penn, Ohio Bigfoot Research, just what do you guys do?
Whoa, that's a loaded question.
It's a big question. Big question. Give us the elevator pitch, I guess.
Okay, so I can give you the elevator pitch is we had a Bigfoot encounter in Pennsylvania, which changed us in so many different ways that we started micro-studying. So we started micro-studying this area where we had our encounter, and then it kind of went in a different direction because what actually happened to us was so profound that we went to a psychologist to talk about what had happened to us because we wanted to make sense of it. And in that, when we went to the psychologist, we met other people that have had anomalous encounters. So then it started us in a whole different direction where now we kind of experiment with the universe and we experiment with the unknown. That's basically like a summary of what we do. So what we do. Can you add?
Can I add? The psychologist is my cousin. And she's really cool.
That is wild. Okay, so it's so to say you guys just do Bigfoot research, it would be an understatement. It sounds like
Right.
there's a much larger umbrella. So I mean, you have my attention and my curiosity. So what was this experience that you guys had? Can you kind of walk us through the when, where, how?
Yeah, I mean, Jenny can start. You take it.
Our big first Bigfoot experience was out at the Shenango where we have been doing our micro study. But Jamie, of course, was dealing with a lot of grief because his father passed away. And I said, you know what? We need to get back to the woods. We need to get back to hiking. Let's just go. Let's just get in a car and we'll go out there and we'll do some hiking. So that's what we did. We went out to the Shenango. At the time, we had our dog Harley, and we just went down this turkey trail, just hiking along. It was a beautiful fall day, not hot, not cold. It was perfect. And we get down to where this stream feeds into the Shenango, and all of a sudden we heard this noise that was so big that we could actually feel it in our bodies. And we just kind of stood there and looked at each other. Now what we know is that noise that we heard after we went home, and we're like, well, what did we hear? What did we experience? We never heard anything like that ever. The closest thing I've said was it sounded like a dinosaur, because that was the only thing I can compare it to. And then when we researched other animal noises, in our area, nothing came close. And then our one friend said, well, you need to hear this recording. It was made by this guy, Matt Moneymaker. I want you to listen to it and see what you think. And when we listened to it, we were like, you got to be kidding me. That's what we heard, except much louder, and you could feel it in your body.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just have a very quick question following that, because I think that's always a good way. One of the ways I've been able to identify some birds, because I have hawks that nest in our yard, and they're hard to differentiate, a lot of the hawks, until you listen to the calls, and that is a real giveaway. I'm really curious, the audio that you were able to listen to, do you know where that was recorded? Was that also in like the Great Lakes region, or was that one of these Western audios? Because it seems to be any of the audio I've seen or heard has been recorded out West. So I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, so the answer to that is when we came home and our friend, like we heard every animal noise. We grew up in Pennsylvania. We're both hikers. We've known each other since we were 10 years old. When we looked up this recording, Matt Moneymaker, we found out is from Finding Bigfoot, the TV show. And the recording came from a town called Wellsville, Ohio, which is only 40 minutes away from where we had this encounter at Shenango. So, I mean, like, it was dead on to what we heard. And the one part that Jenny kind of left out, and I'll kind of go talk about it, is my father did pass away from bone cancer. So I was in this like depression, like grief. And the day of that hike, when we entered the trail, I said a prayer. I said, Dad, if you're here, give me a sign that you're here. Because, that's where I was. Nature's kind of my church. And I forgot all about that. So when we get down to this ravine and we had this encounter where there's a puddle below our feet and this puddle started rippling, and I'm looking at Jenny and literally we can't say anything because like it is so loud, and we heard this noise. And as we're walking out of this area, and I'm carrying my dog the whole way out of this trail, you could hear this thing behind us, and it was making this like and like this loud noise, and it sounded like it was on both sides of us at one point. And when we got home, we did the research like I'm talking about with the Wellsville recording. It's called the Ohio Howl. Then the days following that, I was dissecting it over and over in my head, like, what was this? And I don't know how long it was, but it was a few days, I think, afterwards. And I'm driving in my car and I'm thinking about this whole incident, every detail of it. But the one detail I didn't think about, which takes the direction of our research in a whole different way, was the prayer that I said to my dad, Dad, if you're here, give me a sign. And one of the last memories that I had with my dad was he was living with Jenny and I, and he had bone cancer. He asked me to take him out on our deck so he could listen to the birds and look at the trees. And he said, take me in the house. And I took him in the house and I pulled out some movies and I said, Dad, just watch a movie. So I popped this movie in the DVD player. And as I'm driving to work, I'm literally remembering this memory. And it hit me. The very last movie that my dad watched was Harry and the Hendersons. And I had to it was like this emotional moment where I pulled off the side of the road and I was literally like, I can't believe this. Like, I had this encounter that I would consider very profound, big. I'm saying it's Bigfoot. I don't know at this point. So then I started thinking about the power of our thoughts and the power of our prayers. And I started thinking, this is like vibrational frequency. Like these are unseen tuning and receiving frequencies that we don't know how things operate in the universe. So I remember, I came home and I told Jenny all this, like, you're never going to believe this, but the last movie that I watched with Dad was Harry and the Hendersons. And I was so excited that was part of this experience that I went to the DVD player that was still in the room that my dad stayed in. And I hit the eject button and the movie that popped out was Harry and the Hendersons. So it literally was like this emotional moment. But this goes even further. So we started taking our friend back to this location. He's part of like the Fish and Game and Wildlife, and we wanted to show him where this happened. So we took him to the location and we had both of our dogs. So we hiked all the way down and we were hiking on the way back out, and we heard what sounded like a dog bark. We heard a whistle and what sounded like a man talking. It was like this garbly talking. And I said to Jenny, get the dogs on the leash, because I was worried that some dog was going to come out and attack our dogs. I didn't know. No, but nothing came out. So my friend Roger, who we took there to show him this location, we walked over to the edge of this ravine. And as we're standing at the edge of this ravine, we watched something stand up, and it stood up straight. And it was very tall. It had long hair. It was like dark blackish brown. and it went straight down away from us. So I'm looking at is from the back of it. So I'm seeing the head, I'm seeing shoulders, and I'm seeing arms. And we watched this thing go straight down away from us. And I don't know, there was like no fear that came over me. So Roger and I both decided that we were going to go straight down into this ravine. And we actually started hiking down into it, and it was really difficult to get to. And when we got down there, it's covered in thickets. So like Pennsylvania is very thick with these thick, thorny bushes that are almost the height of yourself. But we made it through. And when we got down there, there was this large like structure, like a nest where this thing was. And whatever it was, like I wasn't a researcher at that point. This is just an experience. I'm telling someone else an experience. I'm showing them where it happened. But something inside of me like said, I'm going to find answers to this, whatever's happening. So Jenny and I decided that our mission was to hike there as much as we could, and we made it like we know the Shenango Reservoir like the back of our hand. And we go there in every season. We try to get out every single day, and we're documenting. And the things that we find kind of blows our mind. And, like we talked earlier about, this encounter was so profound in many different layers that we had to talk to her cousin, who's a psychologist. And, Jenny can tell you, there are things happening to people out there that you can't explain. And the people that we met in this group of people, we called ourselves the free thinkers. And we would sit and we'd freely talk about like what had happened with our encounters. So we had somebody that had a ghostly encounter. We had a woman that believed she was abducted by aliens. So, like we kept an open mind, because like if we're going to share our story with somebody, we would hope that they would believe us and not look at us like we're crazy. So that's where we were. And it's really changed our lives in a huge way, because Jenny and I now look at like everything different, the things that we've learned in school that are real, like everything. You have to start questioning everything. Like I grew up in church. I started questioning like religion and the power of prayer. And I started studying the power of prayer in many different genres of religion, the Buddhist and how they think. And it's really taken us in a really cool direction in life, and kind of exciting. Like you go through this thing where you lose both your parents. I lost both of them in a short time frame. So I think the universe was kind of trying to get my attention. And if like my dad had any kind of humor on the other side, this would be funny to him that this Bigfoot encounter happened. Like it's going to have Jamie having question marks his entire life.
And he did have.
Well, you certainly found a way to keep you too busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, first off, sorry for your loss. Like I just don't want to gloss over that. But it sounds like just stepping back for a sec, it sounds like this whole thing has been a very positive thing for you, though. And like you said, it started from something that even from the get-go wasn't scary. It only just made you kind of more inquisitive, and like it really is a beautiful story. Like seriously, it really is a beautiful story, you guys. I think there's a lot of elements to kind of unpack there. So I'm going to try and keep this somewhat grounded.
Grounded, yes.
I know, right? Well, no, dude, the crazy thing is, so you're sitting here telling this story. I don't know if you guys are into tarot at all, but like I pull one card a day just to give you something to like.
I do Oracle. I do Oracle.
Yeah. So I pulled the star this morning. It's sitting right here. No one else can see that, but you guys can. I pulled the star this morning, which is all about faith and moving forward. And you guys, I pulled this morning. I'm like, oh, I'm not sure what that's about. That's here we are. That's just kind of wild to me. Okay, so let me step back from the woo side of things and just try and keep this moving forward, I guess. So I guess my first question is, whenever you guys had that initial experience, it's not like it all happened like pretty quickly with like your the incident with like your father losing him, and then going on this hike, and then was there a long period of time before you showed back up with your, was his name Roger?
Mhm.
Did that happen quickly, or was that over a period of time?
I mean, it was.
I'm trying to remember.
It's kind of difficult to remember because it happened in 2009. But
Okay, it's a while back.
I believe it was like in a pretty close time frame because it was still something that it was dissecting in my mind. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
really, truly, like I don't know how else to explain it other than literally I was having this. We had this physical encounter that I was very blessed to have it with my wife, who knows how I think and she knows how I probably pray, and she could probably see me on that trailhead saying a prayer, Dad, here, if you give me a sign. And that was very physical, that encounter that we had with the vocalization. But it was also very physical what we saw. And I happened to be blessed again to have Jenny and then my friend Roger to be there. So it's like these huge just slaps, you know, like they slap you in the head and it's trying to get your attention. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure, but this, for me, it's about something was definitely trying to get my attention.
That's really what it sounds like. I mean, and like that perspective is hard to keep sometimes, obviously, because like really what you're asking people to do while listening to the story is, I think, marry the two.
I get that.
Like,
that's really hard even for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hard part. And I think that, you know, like that's the part that you kind of feel crazy. Like, how do these fit together? But the synchronicities really started falling in place. And then I really went in this trajectory of like studying the laws of the universe and the laws of nature. And I started realizing that there's these 12 laws of the universe that started making more sense to me than all the religion that I've understood in all of my life. You know, I don't know. But I really, the biggest thing that stuck with me was all of the synchronicities that started happening afterwards when I started thinking about this encounter and how it happened. And not just one, but I'm saying two encounters with what we believe to be Bigfoot. I mean, 100% I can't say, but the things that we're finding with our research is showing us that there is something more out there in this area. So we look at this thing as if it were a physical being, but I'm also looking at this thing as if it's some sort of spiritual thing, or like the woo, you know, like in the Bigfoot world, they call it the woo. I mean, there's researchers that I highly respect that we all consider that word to be derogatory in a way, because like it's kind of wildly out of the ordinary. But to me, it just means it's not really understood yet. And I think that when you study these things, you start to realize the trail maybe not going to end somewhere, but there is a trail there. There are breadcrumbs along the way.
So I'm kind of curious, and I'll say a very quick story. And it's, you know, my wife had a lot of very positive feelings about her grandmother. Her grandmother had a thing for hummingbirds. Whenever they see in the family a hummingbird, they are reminded of this woman. And that remains so. It's just a hummingbird, but it's not. It's the hummingbird is a real hummingbird. Object permanence will continue to be a hummingbird after it's out of sight of them, but to them it has that. I'm really curious. Obviously, this experience that you shared in the woods, and Brendan and I know that area fairly well. We fly fish a lot. We've been out there. We've heard the dogs because just south of the Shenango area, there is a stream we fish that there's a dog training facility right across the stream, but you can't see it from the stream, so you just hear dogs, and that had nothing to do with anything I'm saying. It is kind of weird, though.
Yeah.
But you both have this shared experience, and I'm really curious. I feel like it's the hummingbird, and that you see there's all this synchronicity between your father and this. You see this as a physical experience and like a physical being as well. I'm really curious what the two of you feel like the motivation of it was. Was it a territorial thing, or do you think it really has more than that? It really is kind of trying to impart a message.
Jenny, how would I'll let Jenny try to answer that.
How would I describe it? I kind of think sometimes we ourselves manifest things to happen, and we put intentions out there, and I think the universe follows up with it. I know some people would think it's just a coincidence or that happened because, it's just that, but when it means something to you and to your heart, it's more than just a coincidence. When it speaks to you.
I mean, I would agree with that, but I would say to everybody that I didn't have Bigfoot on my mind. It was the furthest thing from my mind.
Right.
But I mean, like when you start putting the puzzle pieces together, you have to, it would be like disingenuous to ignore that part of all of it and have to realize, like you said with the hummingbirds, if that's how did she like hummingbirds before she passed? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
There's, maybe that's the way the universe recognizes energy signatures. Like, I mean, even the grief counseling that I went through after losing both my parents, I realized, this is just a physical body, but there's more to us than that. Like if you listen to Einstein and Tesla, we're all energy, and like Jenny's a Reiki healer. So she's all about energy. And I think that like energy never dies. So like that helped me more than like having a Bigfoot encounter to think about like our lives as never ending.
In you saying this was not something that was on your mind when you were out there.
No.
Two very quick thoughts. One, I really liked how you both, you kind of primed by saying that you are in the woods quite a bit. And I think people that do take the time, and you said that's kind of a religious, a spiritual place for you, and we know too that walking through nature regrounds us. It makes us more human. It gets rid of a lot of the stresses of civil modernization and whatnot. And when you couldn't describe the sound, when you couldn't figure out what it was, Brendan and I have had experiences where we're talking to people and they talk about this horrifying sound, and they describe it, and we realize, you got close to a fox, and that's terrifying. When you hear a fox in the wild, it's really terrifying. We talk a lot about priming, especially with regard to ghost stories and spooky things like that, where I talked about like Derrida Lacan, where you walk into an empty parking garage at 3 a.m. You are primed to be ill at ease, to have anxiety, not because you've ever had an experience, but because all the text in the world has told you that you should feel anxiety, that there's someone behind every corner, that every Federalist or Victorian house that's in need of a paint job is almost certainly haunted. We have primed ourselves to believe these things. And that's one way that we can do a negative thing to ourselves. But there's what you were talking about with prayer specifically, is you are kind of priming yourself for a positive thing, not only because the woods are where you feel these things, the woods are where you go to recharge in a very real and meaningful way, but also you saying that prayer to your father, I think primes you for another person. Other people could have had that experience and immediately been terrified, and it closed that door to them. And it seems like it's only tied you both closer to the wilds.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like, I would say that Jenny and I are very in tune with nature, and just hearing you say what you just said, I mean, it really takes your mind, and you think about really how you think. Like I started questioning how I'm thinking, like this prayer that I said, and really, I think we all say prayers throughout our day, like whether it be wishes, whether it be curses, like it's all energy. But yeah, like you said, it was a positive thing. I guess I was looking forward to something positive. Like I'm thinking maybe, I don't know what kind of sign I was looking for, but it wasn't Bigfoot. To have that coincide, like I don't know if a physical being like such as Bigfoot happened to be coming through the Shenango the same time that I had this, well, not the same time, but shortly after, had this memory of my dad watching this movie, because I really don't think I watched the movie so much with my dad. I was watching my dad, and I was thinking to myself, I'm in the final moments of my dad, and he was laughing at this movie thinking it's funny. And I really don't remember the movie, but I do, when I processed it again, then I realized it was Harry and the Hendersons. And like I said, just so hard to not say that those two things went hand in hand. And, it really does fit into a category of like very woo. And I'm okay with that.
There are very few questions that we ask ourselves to which Bigfoot is the answer.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Well, and I think it's wild too, and this is because we talk about perspective a lot and everything. And I think one thing that I've even warned you guys, I worry a lot about, or I think a lot about the mechanics of these things. Like we mentioned earlier, how do you kind of join the two of like, oh, this is a physical thing that has a possible nest, versus it is a spiritual sign from the other, like how can both of those kind of stay together? How can those both be the same thing? But I think that hearing, your story and hearing how it's helped you guys and how it's changed you guys for the better. And so much of that was due to, as Nick mentioned, like your intent going in there. I feel like the how is so much less important than the why. And it seems like you guys have been going after the why, and not letting yourself be hindered by the how,
I mean, I feel like the universe has so many untapped energy sources that we just don't realize it. And I think going to Jenny's cousin and talking with these other people takes you in so many different directions, and it opens you up to the fact that you're not alone. Your podcast is allowing people to talk about things that are outside what people are taught to believe, and you can talk about it in a comfortable way in a setting that you're not going to be viewed as crazy. And I'm okay with whatever I say here because it's my reality and it's my experience. And that's the only thing that I can take away from this is that I started looking at people in general. Every human being that you meet is a different reality. So there's this reality that is meeting another reality that's meeting another reality.
Right. It's a phenomenological aspect.
Right. Yeah. We often say on here that reality is an agreement. It's something that we just kind of decide on. It's not something to be found a lot of times. And along with that, something that you mentioned about you guys, because I do kind of want to hear about the stuff that comes later too, with like you guys doing research in like a small area over and over again. I've heard other, research, other paranormal researchers or Fortean or what have you, finding like a very small area that has either a lot of activity or in some places very little activity initially. What is really happening in this one space? And I think anybody that goes out to the wild or just the woods in general, anywhere in nature, a lot, you start realizing how much is going on, even in places that look relatively stable. As you guys have been researching the same place over and over again, what are some of like the patterns that you've seen, or is there anything to like the liminality of it, or is it movement, or is it stagnation? Like, what are some of the patterns you guys have seen in your research since kind of like deciding to bring that same mindful approach to the same place over and over again?
I'm gonna have to say the structures that we find out there, like some of them, I guess they're called different types of structures, like the teepee ones or the lean-to ones, or there's different types. But I think we're up to how many?
We're up to like 24. So Jenny and I we're mapping things. So when she says structures,
okay, yeah.
When she says structures, they have structure, so they're not like natural falling tree branches that look like they've just fallen out of a tree. Like some people call them glyphs and stuff. But when we say structures, we're talking about these teepee-like structures that have like organic material that's like braided that you would look at and you would say, is that something that a hunter made, like a hunter blind? But in Pennsylvania, it's illegal to use like that kind of stuff. You're supposed to use made. Not saying that people don't, but
I don't know how they would fit in them though.
No, and I don't think there's something that Bigfoot lives in, but I think it's more of like some kind of form of communication or I'm not sure, but they're all of them have a pyramid-like structure. So it's we call them teepees.
Mhm.
But they're also found in Canada, like north from where we live. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we work
Think
with
about it.
researchers in Canada, and there's a woman named Leanne Carnegie who's been documenting these structures, and she's documenting them. And we did a map, so we followed the structures that she's finding in Ontario and followed them straight down through New York and into Pennsylvania. And it's definitely a corridor. So whatever it is could have a migratory pattern if it's a physical being, like if it's a physical thing. And the things that we're finding have like an artist. When an artist creates something, there's a style to it. So there's almost a signature style to what she has in Ontario to what we're finding in Pennsylvania, almost to the exact number of branches that are used in it. Because when Jenny and I document, we have like notebooks that we photograph it, we'll video it, and then we draw it out and we count the number of
We could-
the
limbs,
branches,
yeah.
whatever you want to call it. The coolest thing that we found was actually Jenny. She's a great observer, but she found these 9 tree branches that were twisted out of a tree. So they're like, when I say twisted, they were torqued out of a tree. So there's an end of the tree branch that used to be in the tree. So
I know.
you have to look at it and say, what would have done
how
this?
did-
What
how does this happen?
possibly could have done this to have, like, a human doesn't have that torquing ability to pull that out of a tree, but something did. And, then you go home and we start researching what kind of animals can do this kind of thing. And really there's no animal that can torque 9 tree branches out of a living tree and then use them. So that's really strange. The other cool thing was this almost 30-foot structure that we found.
Yeah, that was a big one that time.
Yeah.
It's decaying now. It's
Yeah.
pretty much decayed.
So it's a 30-foot structure. So there's no real, what would you say, meaning to it other than it's there in this peninsula out at Shenango. So it's an area of the Shenango that is cut off by a railroad. So in order to get there, you have to cross the railroad to get to it. And we found several of these structures. So, I mean, like, I'm pretty proud of the things that we found, but I will say this, the pattern that I've noticed in the years that we've been doing this is that the one pattern that I always kind of take out of context is, how do I think? How does Jenny think? Like, we had to look at the way we were observing things, and you had to analyze, am I putting too much effort into thinking that this is something that Sasquatch made, Bigfoot, or am I putting too much emphasis on the fact that this could be just random? And it's not it can't be random. It can't be. And it's really in areas where human possibility of building these is possible. And we always look at the fact that we're looking around these structures and making sure that there's not some kind of human element like tinfoil or gum wrappers or beer bottles and footprints. And we've actually found prints that we've casted that near these structures that would indicate like a Sasquatch, a physical Sasquatch. So that physical part's there, and the physical observations of what we found are there. So then the other element is the spiritual element, like we'll find one footprint. So where does this one footprint end up?
Yeah.
And there's not more. How is this possible? So then you have to look at it like, is this something paranormal? Or,
I feel that it's both. I feel that it is a physical being and it is a spiritual being. Both.
That's fascinating. Okay, so I have a few questions about the structures because that's something that's always been interesting to me because it's something that is a little more permanent. It's still ephemeral, obviously, but you can it's a little easier to document than a lot of like the sightings. It seems like whatever these structures that people are finding fall into, at least in my mind, like a few different categories. Just from the stuff that I've seen. Again, I haven't, just to be clear, I haven't seen any of your guys' research. So this is just on what I've seen from other folks. There's some stuff that you see and you go, okay, like that's weird, but there's no evidence of like it being not natural, whether it's a blowdown or whether it's from ice or whatnot. Then you come across things that you're like, okay, a person, like a human could have done this, but why? You know, and that's like where you get into like bushcraft and people just screwing around, you know. Then you come across things that could not have been like faked by a human. Like someone would have had to go out into the woods with like a backhoe, and like you see some of these structures where you have an uprooted tree with like the tree ball like 30 feet in the air across like a T of stuff like that. Yeah. And you see that, you go, okay, like a like a person really couldn't have done that even if they wanted to. No. So like there's definitely a spectrum, and I think it's interesting that you guys are like taking a critical eye to it, not just being like, oh, there's some sticks up against another stick, so it's a structure. It sounds like you're trying to be discerning about it. So I guess like in your guys' opinion, how do you draw that line between something that like could be man-made or could not be man-made?
Well, maybe I could explain it this way. Like we did a lot of ghost hunting years ago, but we would also debunk, they call it debunking. So, okay, the noise that we heard, could it have been this? Could it have been that? Not meaning that it was something captured, but it was just actually a natural thing. Like the window was shaking a little bit or something like that. So when we do go out to Shenango, we do kind of look at things with that kind of eye, like you were saying, like just discerning, looking at it from different angles, not just assuming.
I mean, yeah, Jenny and I were both tour guides at haunted locations. So we were tour guides at Mansfield Prison in Ohio, Mansfield Reformatory, and this was years ago. And then we were also tour guides at Haunted Hillview Manor in Newcastle. So like in those years that we did that, I think that it kind of primed us to be curious people, but not just curious people, but people that look at things a little bit differently, but also have to use scientific mind and say to yourself, this is plausible or this is not plausible, and then the really unique part of being tour guides at those locations is we also got to experiment with, I call it experimenting with the field. So we're in these buildings that allow you the opportunity to do things that you might not be able to do during open hours in a location. So, the years that we spent at Mansfield Reformatory, the building had a story to tell. So it actually, I felt like, and this is going to sound crazy, but I feel like the entities that may have been there began to know us because they would know our name. They would say our name when we weren't at the building to other people. Our names would come across recorders. Jenny can tell you, like it's about a building and it tries to tell you a story. So why would the woods not be the same way? The forest has a story to tell, and trees communicate with one another, and that's scientifically proven that mushrooms can communicate, the trees communicate with each other, and then we have to look at ourselves and say to ourselves, we also are a part of nature. So we are also communicating with nature and with the trees and with the plants, and there's a interface that goes along with that,
Well, and there's also something to be said when you say the trees communicate, mushrooms communicate. We know animals vocalize and communicate. It's not necessarily the same, especially with regard to plant and spore life. It's not the same deliberate communication what we consider, but there is a transference of information between one to another, and it's not happening on a conscious level. We know they don't have that capability. But just because we have a very deep and rich history of intentional communication doesn't mean that we too potentially aren't communicating things to one another subconsciously. Pheromones, for example, and just different things, body language, which even though we might not be aware that we're convening something, I'm far more skeptical than not, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't be communicating with things beyond that.
No, I was just going to kind of say, I think it's fascinating the way you kind of put that about the idea of a place getting used to you from like a in one way, shape, or form, and then taking that from a place to outdoors. When it comes to like activity, like we're talking about, that may be hard to explain. If you hear knocks in a house, people say it's ghosts. You hear knocks in the woods, now it's Bigfoot. and I think that like we've kind of, I guess, hinted at, there's a lot more interplay between these things than separation, probably. And I think the communication element probably makes the same amount of sense, because like you said, if you were in these places and you felt that, like, now granted, whether that's just your perception and becoming more comfortable with the place, or whether there are entities communicating back and forth with you, why shouldn't that go for the woods as well? If you're going to the same patch of woods over and over again, it might be partly you becoming more comfortable and picking up on things and be feeling like you're more part of it, and that opens yourself up to interacting in different ways.
Yeah,
I mean, if
there is consciousness, it's kind of hard to tell. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it. I had thought about that before.
I mean, I do feel like consciousness is slightly the final frontier of knowledge. And when you start marrying science and religion, when they start agreeing instead of disagreeing, I think that there's a lot of advancements that can come forward. And like you were just talking about interfacing with the forest, I can tell you, like, we have an area of the Allegheny National Forest that we research in. And I was with a group of people that view Bigfoot strictly as flesh and blood. And I'm okay with that. You know, like, I give myself freedom to be open to all of it, because nobody's going to have the answer. I don't have the answer. But I pulled out, we were having activity during the day, and we had found the tracks, and we had heard things during this hike in the Allegheny National Forest on this logging road that is a private logging road. And I pulled out this recorder, and I was with my friend and his daughter. She was like 8 years old. And we were hearing something behind our camp. And I pulled out the recorder like a ghost hunting. So I pulled out this little recorder that I had, and I kind of approached it like ghost hunting, which was very different from how they research. They research strictly as flesh and blood, and I'm okay with the way I am. And I pulled out the recorder and I asked a question, and the question was, can you tell me the name of this forest? I didn't hear anything with my ear. Nobody heard anything. I started asking other questions. But when we did a playback on this recorder, it was my voice asking, can you tell me the name of this forest? The intelligent response that came across the recorder was Allegheny. It said Allegheny. And, you know, like, you can't really, like, it's like ghost hunting in a lot of ways. And I love that, give ourselves permission to do research like that. But the cool thing about it was, I can't say if it's Bigfoot communicating with me. I can't say that's not a ghost, but it was intelligent. And that's what I was trying to establish. Then I went home and I started researching the Allegheny National Forest. And I was like, how did the Alleghenies get their name? So I went online and I'm researching, and the Alleghenies got their name from the Allegui, which are these giants that lived amongst the Indians, and they were called the Allegui. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then I contacted my friends that I was camping with, and I was like, telling them, you know, like, I know you guys saw me ghost hunting in the woods, like, for Bigfoot, but this is the way I am. This is how I feel comfortable approaching everything in life, just with a curiosity. And it was kind of cool to learn that Allegheny National Forest got its name from these big giant creatures that lived in the forest.
Dude, look up I believe it's the Monongahela people. They had giants in their lore that apparently had mounds down here around Pittsburgh somewhere. There was a podcast I was listening to by a local, just regular history researcher named John Shalkowski, who has all this information about, like,
the weird, fascinating history of Pittsburgh.
Yes. Yep.
He's on KDKA
one of the same
every Saturday.
Right. Yeah. He's a really, really, really good researcher. Doesn't believe in any of this stuff, but has all these stories that are like, I'm like, dude, you're so close. You're right there.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating. I think it's so cool that you're able to, like, again, take, like, the stuff that you guys have learned from like, it sounds like kind of like all eras of your journey.
The other thing too is like, you know, in a community that's pretty small, but kind of big in the same sense, like the Bigfoot community, even ghost hunting, like we were in it way before other people. And, you know, not so much as ghost hunters, but we were tour guides. But then you become and you develop to be a ghost hunter. So, like, the thing I'm trying to say is that really, I think we've given ourselves permission to just be ourselves and not really worry about what other people think. And that's done us a service rather than hold us back, because you can really look at the world with a different lens and curiosity, and it's really helped us, and it's actually helped me in a lot of ways with losing my parents. Like, I wouldn't be able to talk about I wasn't able to talk about this stuff. I wasn't.
Well, yeah, and it's wild, man. I think that, like, and again, for some of our more skeptical listeners, if you remove like any of the like paranormal talk from what you just said, and it sounds like a beautiful story of people growing, anybody would be lucky enough to get to that point. Like, again, it almost like it doesn't matter, but like, who cares if there's an ape in the woods if this is where you ended up, you know?
Yeah, that is exactly what you said. Like, it kind of took me like, okay, I had this big encounter. Okay, I had this bigger encounter. But, you know, like, now the part of me is this encounter that I had is something that I have to share with people, because if somebody out there can relate to this, it's pretty profound. I mean, I know there are other people out there that have had encounters that are way far out more than mine, but, you know, like, somebody will relate to it. Hopefully. You're not crazy if you're listening.
Absolutely. No, I think it's one of the things that your story also kind of reminds me of is, I know this has been kind of like a bit of a common ground in a lot of circles recently, but is this idea of liminality, about change, about transition, and how either Bigfoot or the paranormal or ghosts has something to do with that in one way or another, whether it is more likely to come out whenever you're in a space, both physical or mental, that has a liminal nature to it, or it sounds like in your case, like it kind of helped start one of those times. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition. I don't think I've heard as many stories of someone like having an experience like you guys had, and then that being like the start of the journey, not like just a point along the way.
You know, and I feel like there's so much more that happened since that encounter that I could go into. The synchronicities like blew my mind, and like would blow your mind even more. I mean, seriously, like my friend Shannon, I'll just tell you another one. My friend Shannon, who follows me on Instagram, but she lives where we live. Her brother ended up in prison in South Dakota, and she would send him photos of Jenny and I hiking because they grew up on the Shenango. And she would send these pictures to him because he wanted, you know, he's in a prison. So she called me one day and she's like, Jamie, I have this gift for you from my brother who's in prison. And I was like, I don't even know your brother. Like, I don't know him. But she said, can you meet me? So I met her at this car wash and she gave me this gift. Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing is, like, I was hiking with my dog after all of this happened. And I always like say the one dog passed away that I had with me when we had the encounter. And I would say prayers to her when I'm hiking. And I'm like, Harley, help me find Bigfoot, help me find stuff. So the crazy, crazy thing is, like, my friend Shannon gave me this gift and I unwrapped it at the car wash and I could not believe what I was looking at. This person did not know me, only from her, but he did this painting of me with my dog, with my beagle. And the painting is like, Jenny has it here. She can show you, but I mean, your audience can't see it, but it's a painting that he did in prison. It's like in black and white, but it's, when I first looked at it, I was like, holy crap, that's Bigfoot. And that's my dog. But then I realized, wait a second, that's my dad. Like, it really looks like my dad. And then I realized that's me.
Wow.
This all sounds crazy, but the synchronicities are just
looking at it too. Yeah.
Yeah, you cannot ignore them. You can't ignore them.
Right. And like me and Nick love synchronicities because like too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence sometimes. And like, and again, like there is like the Occam's razor of like, you know, you have enough incidents happen and some of them are going to seem weird, you know, just by law of averages. But whenever they mean something, that's when I think it's different. Like if like is just you receiving that painting and how good it is. I mean, people can't see it, but it's a very well done painting. It looks like better than I could do. The fact that it showed up when it did is just, that's because it's nuts on its own. Like that's like if you just said, hey, a guy in prison who I don't even know painted a picture of my deceased dog and being held by Bigfoot, I'd be like, okay, that's top 10 craziest things I've heard in a while.
It really is. I can't.
Yeah, but then you throw the fact that it had that meaning and you had that time. It just.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. There are really so many that like when I say that the universe is trying to get my attention, I am not joking with you. And it's even very hard for me to wrap my mind around sometimes some of the things that have happened since then. And even now, like, because now I recognize that I call it the field. Whatever the field is out there, this energy field around me is definitely trying to communicate with me. And I know that sounds crazy. It does. I don't care.
I don't think it's crazy.
No, I think, and again, like, well, we kind of go back to something I said earlier, where it's almost like, what did the mechanics matter if these are the effects that it's giving you? Which all sound, again, overwhelmingly positive. They might be confusing. They might be, you might not always know what they mean, but like something's going on, you know. And I think that goes back one step further to what you guys were saying about how you both bring this intent to not only your research, but like just your everyday life. I think at least whenever I was younger and you heard about a lot of paranormal stuff, it was always like, oh, certain people are just more tuned in, or certain people have these abilities or whatever. I think stories like yours show that it's more a decision that you're making and an approach you're bringing to what you're doing that kind of begets these results. You're more active than passive.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm good. I'm not good at anything I would never say that I'm good at anything in life, but I feel like I'm good at this. I feel like I'm good at communicating with the universe and it's responding back to me. And that's fun. It's actually fun. I'm having fun.
True. It is fun.
Well, and Brendan, you keep saying about, you know, whether there's a reason, and I think one of the things I'd respond to with that is that's implying that there's really any reason for anything. I don't feel like there has to be a purpose, really, anything, and any reason or purpose is what we put in it. One of the things I've claimed for a long time is that I'm not sold on ghosts or anything like that. I'm not saying it's not there. I've kind of shared my thoughts on that. I have some doubts, some pretty big doubts about some of the claims that are made.
I would love to take you camping then.
Okay.
We'll go.
What I'm saying is, like, I'm not saying it's not a thing. I have a lot of doubts about a lot of the claims. When really nice people or friends I know make the claims, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't doubt their experience, but I do believe that the world of ghost people and people interested in those, a lot of it is really an expression and an affinity of history and of people that have come and passed. I think it's indicative of that sort of person. And I think a lot of there's an analog with people that are really into Bigfoot and a lot of other cryptid sort of things. I think these are people that have an affinity for nature as well, where they put they put more into that than maybe the typical person. And I think these are good things. And I think that even if it's all a snipe hunt, but it got you connected with these things and it made you feel like a better person, or like you were growing and you were more connected with other people and you developed connections with other people as a result, I can't say anything bad about that. You know, if it's all just smoke and mirrors, there's been some real tangible positive things that have come out of it. I guess I'm not meaning to sound like I'm being backhanded. I just mean that if people say there's no point or there is a purpose, it doesn't matter. There's so much positive things that come out of it. It's being human. I'm speaking in circles now. I'll stop.
Oh, okay, it totally made sense.
It's okay. That happens sometimes when you're talking.
We talk like that.
Yes.
Just to kind of echo what Nick was saying, is that like again, I get caught in mechanics as much as anybody else, but I think that, like you were saying, Jamie, like, this is fun. That's something that I think gets lost sometimes with all like how stuff's supposed to be spooky and scary and like it's all intense and it's the universe and like all this stuff, which yeah, it is, you know, but also it's fun. It's people coming together, having a good time. Sometimes it can be just that. I think as long as people are coming together and people are growing, what does it matter? You know?
Well, I brought this over just kind of as a demonstration. And if you can't see, I'm holding a giant Starisha harmonica.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
It is.
Wow. What country is that from?
This was made in Austria.
Wow.
This is the national instrument of Austria and Slovenia. But here's what I bring it forward, because this kind of talks about your presence as you were doing the tour guides and as being tour guides and the prison and being kind of in the woods and becoming a part of it. I think about this was made in the 1910s or 1920s. I have a lot of really old instruments, and something I've said a lot is that because I've inherited some instruments from friends of mine who are no longer around, and I know their story. And I'm not very sentimental in a lot of things, and a lot of instruments come and go from my hands. There's those ones that'll always stay around because when the oils from your fingers get into the wood, and so forever there will be a very real, no woo, but very real and tangible part of them will forever be in there. And that's just the people that I know. But then there's this, and these old buttons and wood have been played for long before my grandparents were even alive. And I don't know everybody that's attached to this instrument, but they're there. They're in there.
They're there.
In a very real and tangible way. And there's a very childish part of me that feels that if only I can become good enough, they'll never leave. You know?
Yeah, that's funny.
No, I think that's beautiful though. I think that's beautiful.
That is great.
Oh yeah, I thought he was gonna play it. I got excited.
Next time, we will eventually have some squeeze box on this podcast. But I think that I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I think we're gonna have to have another one at some point. You guys aren't far away, so I'm just gonna tease everybody now with maybe we can do an on-site episode at some point up in Shenango.
Yeah, that'd
be a lot of fun. I know I'd really enjoy it. Not only because I'd like to just hang out with you guys, but I think the idea of doing an on-site episode in a place where you guys have been doing all this research and everything and whatnot would be really interesting for folks. So yes, I mean, I just want to thank you guys again for your time. For folks who are on social media and everything, where can folks interact with you guys and see what you do and follow along?
I run Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research. It started by Tony Merkel. You can find me there. I have the Penn, Ohio Bigfoot Field Research Evidence. It's something that I have where I document my own research, and you can go to it, but it's pretty much just my stuff. I'm not into like followers and all that. You can find Jamie King on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Well, you found me. I don't know. I
Yeah,
found
no. We'll make sure we have all the appropriate links in the show notes and everything. So because again, I think people are going to want to follow along with your guys' journey from here on out. I know I am. So
Yeah, thank you.
So if anyone else has any thoughts or comments, you can always reach out to us here at the Ghost Furnace at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com. Find us on Instagram and Facebook. And so again, Jamie and Jenny King, thank you so much for spending the time with us this evening, and hope you have a wonderful night.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.